Get out. The words sliced through the air like shattered glass. You were never family. I stood frozen in the foyer of what had been my home for 5 years, watching Margaret Thornfield point toward the door with a hand adorned in rings David had given her. Behind her, movers were already hauling furniture onto the lawn. My furniture. My children's furniture. "Mommy, why are they taking my bed?" 3-year-old Emma tugged at my sleeve, her voice small and confused. Ethan clutched his stuffed rabbit tighter, his twin sister's fear mirrored in his wide eyes. "Margaret, please," my voice cracked. "David just died 2 weeks ago. We need time to—" "Time?" Richard, David's older brother, stepped forward with a sneer that made my stomach turn. "You've had enough time living off our family's wealth. This house belongs to the Thornfields. You were just a nurse my brother married on a whim." The words hit like physical blows. Just a nurse, on a whim. As if the 5 years we'd built together meant nothing. As if David hadn't held my hand through every ultrasound appointment, hadn't cried when the twins were born, hadn't whispered promises about forever on our wedding night. "David left us this house," I managed, my arms wrapping protectively around my children. "He said we'd always be taken care of." Margaret laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the marble floors. "My son said a lot of things before the cancer ate away at his judgment. Do you know what medical bills cost, Charlotte? Do you have any idea what experimental treatments run? Every penny David had went to doctors who couldn't save him anyway." "That's not possible. David showed me the accounts. He said—" "He lied." Richard crossed his arms, his expensive watch catching the light. "There's nothing left. No inheritance, no trust fund, nothing. You're broke, Charlotte, and you're standing in our house." My world tilted. The elegant foyer spun around me, the chandelier David and I had picked out together now seeming to mock me with its crystal tears. 2 weeks. It had been 2 weeks since I'd watched them lower my husband's casket into the ground. 2 weeks since I'd felt Emma and Ethan's small hands in mine as we said goodbye to their father. 2 weeks since my entire world had collapsed. And now this. "Please," I whispered, hating how desperate I sounded. "Just give us a few days to find somewhere to—" "The movers will finish within an hour." Margaret's voice was ice. "You can take your personal belongings. Everything else stays. It was purchased with Thornfield money." I watched helplessly as strangers carried out the rocking chair where I'd nursed my babies, the kitchen table where we ate breakfast as a family just 3 weeks ago before David's final hospitalization, the framed photos from our walls, memories in glass and wood being tossed into boxes like garbage. Emma started crying. Ethan joined her, and the sound of their sobs was a knife twisting in my chest. "You're monsters," I said quietly, meeting Margaret's cold gaze. "Your son loved me. He loved his children. How can you do this to them?" "My son is dead." Margaret's composure cracked for just a moment, grief flashing across her face before hardening back into cruel resolve. "And you were never good enough for him anyway, a foster kid who scraped her way through nursing school. Did you really think you belonged in this world?" The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She said it so matter-of-factly, as if my entire existence was simply beneath her, as if loving her son, bearing his children, caring for him through 18 months of brutal cancer treatment counted for nothing. I knelt down and pulled Elma and Ethan close, their small bodies shaking against mine. "It's okay, babies. Mommy's got you. Everything's going to be okay." But I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know anything anymore. An hour later, I stood on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases, a box of photos, and my children. The house loomed behind us, its windows already dark and unwelcoming. A stranger's house now. Or rather, the house it had always been. The house I'd only been allowed to borrow for a brief, beautiful moment. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, her voice small. I looked down at my daughter's face, so much like David's, and felt something harden in my chest. Grief, rage, determination. I didn't know yet. But I couldn't fall apart, not now when they needed me. It's somewhere safe, I told her, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Somewhere that's just ours. The studio apartment I found 3 days later was a far cry from the 6-bedroom estate we'd been thrown out of. One room served as bedroom, living room, and playroom. The kitchenette had a hot plate and a mini fridge. The bathroom was so small I could barely turn around in it. But it was ours. Barely. The deposit had taken the last of my savings and rent was due again in 27 days. 27 days to figure out how to survive. I sat on the edge of the air mattress I'd bought at a discount store, watching Emma and Ethan sleep curled together like they'd done in the womb. The street light outside cast shadows across their peaceful faces, and for just a moment, I could pretend everything was fine. Then, reality crashed back in. I had $300 left in my checking account, no job, because I'd quit nursing 2 years ago to care for David full-time when his cancer came back. No family, because foster care didn't exactly provide a support network. No friends, because I'd been so consumed with being David's wife and the twins' mother that I let all my other relationships fade away. I had nothing except 2 sleeping children and a growing rage at the man I'd loved. Because David had lied to me. He'd looked me in the eyes a dozen times during those final months and promised everything would be okay. He'd held my hand and sworn he'd made arrangements, that the twins and I would be taken care of, that I shouldn't worry about anything except being there with him. He'd made me sell my car because he said we didn't need 2 vehicles. He'd convinced me to close my personal bank account and combine everything into our joint account because it was easier. He'd insisted I not go back to work, promising his life insurance would be more than enough. And it had all been lies. Or had it? I grabbed my phone, pulling up the bank app for the joint account. The balance stared back at me. $473. That was it. 5 years of marriage, and this was what remained. But something nagged at me. David had been secretive those last few months, paranoid even. He'd installed a safe in his study and made multiple trips to meet with lawyers, trips he'd insisted on taking alone, despite how weak he'd become. He'd been protecting something, or hiding something. I thought about the way Margaret and Richard had been so quick to throw us out, so efficient in their cruelty. They had the movers scheduled, had probably started planning the moment David died, maybe even before. And David known it. He'd known what his family was capable of. He'd grown up with them after all. He'd seen their greed, their manipulation, their complete lack of compassion for anyone outside their precious bloodline. So why hadn't he protected us? Unless he had. The thought struck me like lightning. What if David had hidden assets where his family couldn't find them? What if his secrecy in those final months had been exactly that? Protection against the vultures who'd circled his deathbed. But where would he hide something like that, and how would I ever find it? I must have fallen asleep sometime after 3 a.m. because I woke to Emma patting my face gently. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Reality crashed back in. Hungry children. No food in the apartment. $300 to last until I figured out my next move. I made the kids toast with the cheap bread I'd bought and promised them pancakes soon, even though I didn't know when soon would be. They ate without complaints, and that somehow made it worse. They were too young to understand how dramatically their lives had changed. Too young to realize that the big house with the playroom and the yard was gone forever. Too young to know their father had failed them. Or had he? The thought circled back, persistent as a heartbeat. David had been many things,
but careless about his children's welfare wasn't one of them. Even as the cancer ate away at his body, his mind stayed sharp. He'd been planning something. I'd seen it in his eyes, felt it in the way he'd grip my hand and tell me to trust him. Trust me, Charlotte. No matter what happens, trust me. I said those words back to him as he took his last breath. I'd meant them then. Did I mean them now? My phone rang, shattering my thoughts. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Charlotte Thunderfield? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? My name is Vincent Castellano. I was David's best friend from college. I'm sorry I didn't make it to the funeral. I was out of the country. But I need to see you. Today, if possible. It's urgent. My heart stuttered. I don't understand. What's this about? Not over the phone. His voice dropped lower, almost conspiratorial. David gave me something to give you. Something his family can't know about. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour? The north entrance? Every instinct screamed this was a trap. But what did I have left to lose? I'll be there. Riverside Park was crowded with joggers and families. Normal people living normal lives. I pushed the double stroller with Emma and Ethan, scanning faces for someone who looked like they might be Vincent Castellano. Charlotte? I turned. The man approaching was tall, maybe 40, with kind eyes that were currently red-rimmed from lack of sleep, or crying, or both. He wore jeans and a jacket, nothing threatening, but I still gripped the stroller tighter. Vincent? He nodded, his gaze dropping to the twins. His expression softened. They looked just like him. What do you want? I didn't have energy for small talk. David loved you. He said it simply, like a fact. I need you to know that first. Everything he did to protect you and these kids. Then why am I homeless? The words came out bitter, sharp. Why did his family throw us out with nothing? Why did David leave us? He didn't. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick, heavy with papers. What is this? Open it, but not here. Go somewhere private. Read everything, and then call the number on the card. The lawyer is expecting to hear from you. I don't understand. Vincent's jaw tightened. David's family has been embezzling from the family business for years. He found out about it 6 months before his diagnosis. He started moving money, protecting assets, building a case. But then the cancer came back and he knew he was running out of time.
My breath caught. How much money? In liquid assets alone? Over $200 million. The world stopped. The park, the people, everything faded except Vincent's words echoing in my head. $200 million? That's impossible, I whispered. We lived comfortably, but not. David didn't want his family knowing what he was worth, so he lived modestly, invested quietly, and when he realized they were stealing from the business he'd built, he started moving everything into accounts and trusts they couldn't touch. Accounts in your name, trusts for the kids. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Why didn't he tell me? Because he knew what you do. Vincent's voice was gentle. You would have insisted on confronting his family. You would have tried to fix things, to save relationships that couldn't be saved. David knew you, Charlotte. He knew your heart, and he knew that knowledge would put you in danger. I'm his wife. I deserve to know. You deserved to be protected. Vincent's voice hardened, and that's exactly what he did. Margaret and Richard have been circling like sharks, waiting for David to die so they could take everything. But there's nothing to take.
Everything's locked in trusts they can't access, protected by lawyers they can't intimidate, secured by documentation they can't forge. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. Inside was the proof of my husband's love, the proof that he hadn't failed us after all. Or was it? "Why should I trust you?" I asked. "I don't even know you. For all I know, this is another scheme to what? You have nothing left to take." Vincent's words were blunt, but not unkind. "Look, I get it. You've been betrayed by the people who should have protected you. But David was my best friend. I was his best man at your wedding. I'm godfather to your kids, even if you didn't know it. He trusted me with this because he knew I'd make sure you and Emma and Ethan were taken care of if anything happened to him." Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, can we go to the swings?" I looked at my daughter, then at Ethan, then back at Vincent. 2 weeks ago, I had a husband, a home, and a future. Now I had nothing but questions and an envelope full of papers that promised everything. "Go read those documents," Vincent said quietly. "Then call the lawyer. His name is Robert Chen. He's been handling David's affairs for 3 years, completely separate from the family's attorneys. He'll explain everything. If what you're saying is true, why did Margaret and Richard throw us out? If they can't get to the money, why?" "Because they don't know yet." Vincent's smile was grim. "They think they won. They think by kicking you out, by making you desperate and vulnerable, they can force you to sign over whatever small inheritance David left. They're planning to contest the will, claim you manipulated a sick man, take custody of the twins to get access to any trust funds." Rage, pure and hot, flooded through me. "Those absolute—" I bit off the curse, conscious of little ears nearby. "They can't do this. I'm their mother. I've done nothing wrong." "You're poor, you're alone, you're vulnerable. And in their world, that's crime enough. But Charlotte, you're not actually any of those things. You just need to open that envelope and claim what David left you." My hands shook as I clutched the envelope tighter. "Why now? Why didn't you come sooner?" "Because David's instructions were specific. I was supposed to wait 2 weeks after the funeral. He said you'd need time to grieve, to feel the full weight of what his family was capable of. He said you'd need to be angry enough to fight back." Angry enough, as if anger was in short supply right now. He knew they'd throw us out? He knew exactly what they do. He grew up with them, remember? He knew their playbook, and he made sure you'd have every weapon you needed to destroy them. I looked down at Emma and Ethan, innocent and trusting, playing with the stroller's wheels. They deserved better than this, better than being pawns in their grandmother's power games, better than a mother who was too shell-shocked to fight back. David had fought, even dying, even in pain, he'd fought to protect us. Now it was my turn. "I need to get them lunch," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And then I'll read everything." Vincent nodded. "The lawyer's number is in there. Call him today. And Charlotte, David also left you something else. Instructions for what comes next." "What comes next?" His smile was sharp. "Justice." The studio apartment felt even smaller when I closed the door behind us. I fed the kids peanut butter sandwiches and put on a cartoon, then sat on the floor with the envelope. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. The first document was a letter, written in David's familiar handwriting. The sight of it made my chest tighten. Grief and rage tangled together until I couldn't separate them. "My darling Charlotte, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving you alone. I'm sorry for the pain you're feeling. I'm sorry for what my family has undoubtedly put you through. But I'm not sorry for protecting you. By now, Vincent has told you about the money. about the accounts and trusts I set up in your name, about the evidence I've been gathering against Margaret and Richard. I know you're angry that I kept this from you. I know you feel betrayed. But Charlotte, I need you to understand something. My family would have killed me themselves if they'd known what I was doing, and they would have destroyed you in the process. Margaret embezzled $12 million from the family business over 6 years. Richard laundered another $8 million through shell companies. They've been bleeding the company dry while I was building it up. And when I confronted them, they threatened to make sure you and the twins got nothing when I died. So I made sure they couldn't touch you. Everything in this envelope is yours. The accounts, the properties, the investments, all of it legal, all of it protected, all of it beyond their reach. But Charlotte, I'm not asking you to just take the money and run. I'm asking you to fight. Fight for our children. Fight for justice. Fight to make sure my family never hurts anyone else the way they've hurt you.
Vincent will help you. Robert Chen, the lawyer, will help you. I've given them both instructions. Everything you need to destroy Margaret and Richard's empire and protect our babies is in your hands now. I love you. I loved you from the moment you walked into my hospital room 3 years before the cancer, when I was in for a stupid skiing accident, and you were the night shift nurse who made me laugh despite a broken leg. I loved you when you said yes to marrying a man you'd only known 6 months. I loved you when you gave me Emma and Ethan. I loved you every single day we had together. And I'm loving you now, from wherever I am, as you read this and prepare to do what I couldn't. Win, Charlotte. Take everything from them. Not for revenge, though God knows they deserve it, but to protect our children from ever being under their control. You're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and you're about to show my family exactly what happens when they underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. I believe in you. Forever yours, David. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, before I could bring myself to look at the other documents. Bank statements showing accounts in my name with balances that made me dizzy. Property deeds for houses in California, Montana, and Maine, all in my name. Investment portfolios worth tens of millions. Trust funds for Emma and Ethan that would ensure they'd never want for anything. And then, in a separate folder, evidence. Emails between Margaret and Richard discussing how to hide money from David. Forged documents showing fake expenses. Bank transfers to offshore accounts. Years of systematic theft, all carefully documented. David had built a case that would destroy them. He'd handed me the nuclear codes, and he'd asked me to use them. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Robert Chen's card. Mrs. Thornfield, he answered on the first ring. I've been expecting your call. Is it real? My voice cracked. All of it? Every word, every document. Your husband was very thorough. They're trying to take my children. I know. I've already filed a countermotion. With your permission, I'd like to take a much more aggressive approach. What kind of approach? The kind that ensures Margaret and Richard Thornfield spend the next decade defending themselves against criminal charges while you rebuild your life in peace. I looked at Emma and Ethan, still absorbed in their cartoon, unaware that their entire future was being decided in this moment. Tell me what I need to do. Robert Chen's voice was steady, professional, and absolutely ruthless. First, we're going to stop playing defense. Your husband left very specific instructions about how to handle his family. Are you willing to follow them? Every single one. Good, because this is going to get ugly before it gets better. But Mrs. Thornfield, I promise you, by the time we're done, no one will ever underestimate you again. I wiped my tears away and felt something shift inside me. Grief was still there, sharp and aching, but underneath it, something harder was forming. Something that felt like steel. When do we start? Today.
Pack a bag for you and the children. I'm sending a car to pick you up in an hour. You're staying at David's property in Riverside until we get this sorted out. It's secure, private, and most importantly, it's in your name. Margaret can't touch it. I don't understand. If David had a house, why did we live? He bought it 2 months before he died. He never told his family about it. He wanted you to have somewhere safe to go when everything fell apart. He thought of everything, Mrs. Thornfield. Now we just need to execute his plan. An hour later, a black car pulled up outside the studio apartment. The driver helped me load our meager belongings while Emma and Ethan bounced with excitement at the adventure. "Where are we going?" Emma asked. I buckled her into the car seat and kissed her forehead. "Somewhere Daddy made for us. Somewhere special." The house in Riverside was nothing like the Thornfield estate. It was smaller, warmer, filled with light and purpose instead of cold opulence. As we walked through the door, I saw that David had furnished it simply but beautifully. There were toys already in the bedrooms for the twins, photos of our family on the walls, a note on the kitchen counter in his handwriting, "Welcome home." I broke down then, grief and relief and rage all pouring out of me at once. Emma and Ethan clung to me, confused and scared by their mother's tears, and I held them tight. "It's okay," I told them, meaning it for the first time since David died. "Everything is going to be okay now." The next morning, Robert Chan arrived with a briefcase full of documents and a plan that made my blood sing with satisfaction. "Margaret and Richard filed for emergency custody yesterday. They're claiming you're mentally unstable, financially destitute, and unable to care for the children properly." "None of that is true." "I know, and we're going to prove it spectacularly. But first, we need to let them think they're winning." I frowned. "Why?" "Because people get sloppy when they're confident. Margaret is so certain she can manipulate you, so sure you're helpless, that she's going to overplay her hand. And when she does, we're going to be there to document every misstep." "What do you need me to do?" Robert's smile was sharp. "I need you to go to the custody hearing next week and act like the broken widow they expect you to be. Can you do that?" I thought about the last 2 weeks, the desperation, the fear, the feeling of having nothing left to lose. Acting broken wouldn't be hard. I'd lived it. "I can do that." "Good, because while you're playing vulnerable, I'm going to be filing criminal complaints about the embezzlement. By the time Margaret realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." Over the next week, I prepared. Robert coached me on what to say, how to act, what to reveal, and what to keep hidden. Vincent checked in daily, making sure I had everything I needed, offering to watch the twins when I needed time to think. And slowly, the plan took shape. Margaret and Richard thought they were hunting wounded prey. They didn't realize they'd walked into a trap. The custody hearing was held in a gray room that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. Margaret sat on one side with her lawyer, dressed in elegant black as if still in mourning for the son she'd discarded along with his widow and children. I sat across from her in a dress I'd bought at a thrift store, playing the part of the desperate single mother. Let her think I was broken. Let her think she'd won. "Mrs. Thornfield," Margaret's lawyer began, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "can you describe your current living situation?" "I'm renting a studio apartment." The lie came easily. Robert had made sure I kept paying rent on it, maintaining the illusion. "It's small, but it's clean." "And how are you supporting yourself and the children?" "I'm looking for work. I was a nurse before I married David, but I stopped working to care for him during his illness." "So you have no income?" "Not currently, no." Margaret's lawyer smiled, scenting blood. "And you're aware that the Thornfield family has offered to take the children temporarily until you get back on your feet?" "They threw me out of my home 2 weeks after my husband's funeral," I said quietly, letting real emotion leak into my voice. "They told me I was never family. They called me a gold digger and said my children were a burden." Margaret's face remained impassive, but I saw Richard shift uncomfortably beside her. "Mrs. Thornfield, you're clearly traumatized and not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I met Margaret's gaze across the room. You want to take my children because you think they're your property. But they're not. They're mine and David's, and you will never have them. Your Honor, Margaret's lawyer interjected smoothly. This emotional instability is exactly why we're requesting emergency custody. Your Honor, Robert Chen stood, his voice calm and measured. I'd like to submit evidence regarding Mrs. Thornfield's actual financial situation. He placed a stack of documents in front of the judge. Bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios. All of it official. All of it legally mine. The judge's eyebrows rose. Mrs. Thornfield, you told the court you were destitute. I said I had no current income, Your Honor. I never said I was poor. Margaret's face went white. Richard leaned forward, trying to see the documents. Their lawyer looked like he'd been slapped. What is this? Margaret demanded. Robert smiled. This is proof that David Thornfield left his entire estate to his wife and children, properly documented and legally secured. Mrs. Thornfield owns 3 properties worth a combined $18 million. She has investment accounts totaling over $200 million. She has more than enough resources to provide for her children. That's impossible, Richard sputtered. David was broke. The medical bills were paid from accounts you had no knowledge of. David Thornfield was a wealthy man who chose to live modestly. He was also a man who discovered his mother and brother had been embezzling from the family business for years. He placed another set of documents in front of the judge. These are bank records showing systematic theft by Margaret and Richard Thornfield, totaling over $20 million. David documented everything before his death. He also ensured that all legitimate assets were transferred to his wife's name beyond the reach of those who would steal from his children. The courtroom erupted. Margaret was on her feet, her composure finally shattered. This is absurd! Those records are fake. David loved his wife and children enough to protect them from you, Mrs. Thornfield. He knew exactly what you were capable of, and he made sure you'd never get your hands on another penny of his money. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Mrs. Thornfield, Mr. Thornfield, I am denying your possession for custody. Furthermore, I'm ordering that you have no contact with the minor children until the criminal investigation into these embezzlement charges is complete. He looked at Margaret with barely concealed disgust. You came into my courtroom and tried to take children from their grieving mother while hiding your own criminal behavior. That kind of manipulation ends now. Margaret lunged toward me, and for a second, I thought she might actually attack. But security was faster, and I watched as they escorted her from the courtroom, still screaming about betrayal and lies. Richard followed, his face gray with shock. The judge turned to me, his expression softening. Mrs. Thornfield, I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry you've had to deal with this on top of your grief. Your husband clearly loved you very much. He did. And for the first time, I believed it completely. Outside the courthouse, Vincent was waiting with the twins. Emma ran to me and I scooped her up, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Did we win? Ethan asked. I looked at Robert, who nodded. We won, baby. You're staying with Mommy forever. And Grandma Margaret? Grandma Margaret is going away for a while. She was mean to you. Yes, she was, but she can't hurt us anymore. That night, after I put the twins to bed in their new rooms in the house David had bought for us, I sat in the living room with Vincent and Robert, drinking wine and processing everything that had happened. Margaret and Richard will be formally charged next week, Robert said. With the evidence David compiled, the district attorney is confident of convictions. They're looking at serious prison time. What about the family business? Technically yours, Vincent said. David owned 60%. As his wife, that passes to you. You could sell it, or you could run it, or you could burn it to the ground out of spite. I laughed, surprising myself. I'm a nurse, not a businesswoman. You're whatever you choose to be, Robert said. David believed that. He saw your strength even when you couldn't. I looked at the photo of David on the mantle, taken at our wedding. He was smiling, truly happy, with no shadow of the illness that would take us from him. He looked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He knew they'd throw me out, I said slowly. He knew I'd feel broken and helpless. He knew I'd need to hit rock bottom before I could fight back. He knew you needed to be angry, Vincent agreed. David was a lot of things, but he understood people. He understood you. Did you know? About the embezzlement? About the money? Not until he got sick. He told me everything those last few months, made me promise to make sure you got the envelope, made me swear I'd help you destroy his family if they came after you and the kids. Why didn't he turn them in himself? Because he loved his mother, despite everything, and he hoped until the very end that they'd do the right thing. But he knew they wouldn't. Vincent's voice was sad. David always saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. I thought about that, about David keeping his family's secrets as they plotted to steal from him, about him protecting me by hiding the truth, even though it meant I'd hate him for a while.
He could have told me, I said. He could have trusted me with it. He did trust you, Robert said. He trusted you to be exactly who you are. Strong enough to survive, brave enough to fight, smart enough to win. He leaned forward. Mrs. Thornfield, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've seen a lot of estate planning, but I've never seen anyone plan as thoroughly as your husband did. He didn't just leave you money, he left you weapons, and he knew you'd use them. I let that sink in. David hadn't abandoned us. He'd armed us. What happens now? I asked. Now, Vincent said, raising his glass, you live. You raise your kids, you build whatever life you want, and you never let anyone make you feel small again. I raised my own glass. To David, who saw me when no one else did. To David, they echoed. We drank, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief and rage. I felt possibility. The next few months were a whirlwind. Margaret and Richard were indicted on multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. The family business, once I saw the extent of their theft, I chose to sell rather than try to salvage it. It brought in another $50 million, all of which went into trusts for Emma and Ethan. I moved us permanently into the Riverside house. Emma and Ethan started preschool. I went back to nursing part-time, not because I needed the money, but because I needed the purpose. And slowly, painfully, I began to heal. 6 months after the custody hearing, I stood in the courthouse again, this time for Margaret and Richard's sentencing. The jury had found them guilty on all counts, and now the judge would decide their fate. Margaret sat at the defense table, her elegant facade finally cracked. She looked older, smaller somehow. Richard beside her had aged a decade in 6 months, his expensive suit unable to hide the defeat in his shoulders. The judge reviewed the case with clinical precision, detailing every theft, every forged document, every betrayal of trust. When he finally looked up, his expression was granite. Margaret Thornfield, Richard Thornfield, you didn't just steal money, you stole from your own family. You betrayed a dying man's trust, and when that wasn't enough, you attempted to take children from their mother to maintain access to assets you had no legal right to claim. He paused, letting the words sink in. This court sentences Margaret Thornfield to 12 years in federal prison, Richard Thornfield to 10 years. You will each pay full restitution plus penalties, and you are permanently barred from any contact with Emma and Ethan Thornfield. Margaret's sob echoed through the courtroom. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness where my anger used to be. As they led her away in handcuffs, Margaret turned to look at me. Our eyes met, and for just a second, I saw her as David must have seen her once. His mother, flawed, human, broken by her own greed. I'm sorry, she mouthed. Too little,
too late. I walked out of that courthouse and into the spring sunshine, where Vincent waited with the twins. They were laughing, chasing each other around the fountain, their grief softened by time and love, and the stability I'd fought so hard to give them. "It's over," Vincent said. No, I watched Emma catch Ethan, both of them dissolving into giggles. "It's just beginning." Because somewhere in the wreckage of betrayal and loss, I'd found something I didn't know I had. Myself. Not David's widow, not the Thornfield's victim, not even the nurse who'd fought her way out of foster care. Just Charlotte. Mother. Survivor. Fighter. Strong enough to stand on my own. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with papers spread before me. Not legal documents this time, business plans. Robert had helped me establish a foundation, and now I needed to decide what to do with it. The David Thornfield Foundation. Because even though he kept secrets, even though his protection felt like betrayal, he loved us, and he'd given me the resources to turn our pain into something meaningful. "What are you working on?" Vincent had stayed for dinner, as he often did these days. Not romantic, despite what some people assumed, just friendship, support, the kind of chosen family I'd never had before. "I want to help single parents," I said. "Women who've lost their partners, people facing medical bankruptcies, families torn apart by greed and manipulation." "That's a lot of people." "I know." I looked at the numbers David had left me. Enough money to change thousands of lives. And I have a lot of resources. And I have time. And I have a reason. Vincent smiled. David would be proud. "Would he?" I asked. "I destroyed his family." "They destroyed themselves. You just made sure they faced consequences." He leaned back in his chair. "Charlotte, you didn't ruin anyone's life. You protected your children. There's a difference." Maybe. But sometimes, late at night when the twins were sleeping and the house was quiet, I wondered if David knew what it would cost me, if he understood that justice would feel less like victory and more like surviving a war. But then I'd remember Margaret's cold voice telling me I was never family, Richard's sneer as they threw us into the street, their casual cruelty towards two grieving children, and I'd remember why I fought. The foundation launched 6 months later with a gala that terrified me more than any courtroom battle. Standing in front of hundreds of wealthy donors, telling my story, asking for support, it felt like being flayed open. But I did it, because the alternative was staying silent, and I was done being silenced. 3 years ago, I began, my voice shaking slightly. I was a nurse who fell in love with a patient. David Thornfield came into my life like a hurricane, sweeping me up in a love story I'd never dared to dream about. We married, we had twins, we built a life. I paused, finding Emma and Ethan in the crowd. Vincent was watching them, keeping them entertained during the speeches. And then, cancer came back. For 18 months, I watched the man I loved fight for his life. I held his hand through chemotherapy. I learned to give injections. I became fluent in medical terminology I never wanted to know. And when he died, I thought my world ended. The room was silent, everyone leaning forward. 2 weeks after his funeral, my family threw me and my 3-year-old twins out of our home. They told me we had nothing, that David had left us nothing, that we were nothing. I let that sink in, watching faces react with shock and sympathy. But David had left us something, not just money, though he'd secured our financial future in ways his family couldn't touch. He left us proof of his love, evidence that even dying, he was thinking about protecting his children, documentation that would ensure the people who'd betrayed him faced justice. My voice strengthened.
The David Thornfield Foundation exists because my husband understood something fundamental. Wealth means nothing if you don't use it to protect the vulnerable. Money is worthless if it just sits in banks instead of changing lives. Power is empty if you don't use it to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. I looked around the room at the glittering crowd. Every person in this room has resources: time, money, influence, connections. The question is, what are you doing with them? Are you hoarding them? Or are you using them to make sure that the next widow doesn't have to fight the battles I fought? That the next single parent doesn't have to choose between feeding their kids and paying rent? That the next family destroyed by medical debt finds support instead of judgment? The applause started slowly, then built until the room thundered with it. People stood, hands coming together in a wave of sound that washed over me. And for the first time since David died, I felt him, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a presence, a warmth, an approval that said, this is what I wanted for you. The foundation raised $3 million that night. Within a year, we'd helped 200 families. Within 2 years, we'd opened support centers in 5 cities. Within 3 years, we were one of the largest family assistance organizations in the state. And with every family we helped, every crisis we averted, every child we kept safe and fed and loved, I felt the poison of Margaret's cruelty leaching out of me. She tried to make me believe I was nothing, worthless, a gold digger who tricked her way into a family that didn't want her. But I'd proven her wrong with every breath, every choice, every life the foundation touched. I was exactly who David had seen all those years ago in that hospital room, a fighter with a heart big enough to change the world. Emma and Ethan grew. They asked about their father sometimes, and I told them the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the fairy tale, the real story of a man who loved them enough to protect them from his own family, who'd sacrificed his relationship with his mother to ensure his children never wanted for anything, who trusted me to be strong enough to finish what he'd started. Was Daddy a good man? Emma asked once, when she was 7. I thought about it, about the secrets he'd kept, the burden he'd placed on me, the year of struggling I'd endured because he couldn't bring himself to tell me the truth. He was a complicated man, I said finally. He made mistakes. He kept secrets when he should have been honest, but he loved us with everything he had. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Ethan frowned. But Grandma Margaret said Daddy was weak, that he let you manipulate him. Ah, so Margaret's poison had reached even here, despite the restraining orders and the prison sentence. Your grandmother was wrong about a lot of things, I said carefully. She thought love was weakness. She thought trust was stupid. She thought the only thing that mattered was money and power and control. What do you think? Emma asked. I pulled them close, these 2 beautiful humans who'd survived so much. I think love is the strongest thing in the world. I think trusting the right people is the smartest choice you can make. And I think that money and power mean nothing if you don't use them to take care of the people you love. They absorbed this with the seriousness that children bring to important truths. We're rich, right? Ethan asked. Yes. Are we going to be like Grandma Margaret? I looked at my son, at the fear in his eyes that he might become the villain in his own story. No, baby. Because we're going to remember what it felt like to have nothing. We're going to remember what it's like to be scared and alone and desperate. And we're never going to make anyone else feel that way. Promise? Emma whispered. Promise. 5 years after David's death, Margaret was released from prison. She'd served her sentence, paid her restitution, and emerged into a world that had moved on without her.
She tried to contact me once, through a lawyer, asking to see her grandchildren, claiming she'd changed, begging for forgiveness. I sat with the letter for a long time, feeling the weight of her words. Part of me, the part that remembered being a scared foster kid who just wanted to belong somewhere, understood her desperation, understood what it meant to be cast out from family. But I remembered Emma and Ethan crying as their belongings were thrown into the street. I remembered the coldness in Margaret's eyes when she called me worthless. I remembered the year of fear and struggle that could have been avoided if she'd shown even an ounce of compassion. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I wrote back a single sentence. Your grandchildren are thriving. That's all you need to know. Vincent thought I should have just ignored it. Robert thought I was too generous. But I needed Margaret to know that despite everything she'd done, her son's children were loved and safe and happy. That was victory enough. The twins were 10 when they asked to read their father's letter, the one he'd left me that terrible day when my worlds fell apart. Are you sure? I asked. It's heavy stuff. We're ready, Emma said, with David's stubborn determination in her voice. So I gave them the letter, and I sat with them as they read about the father they barely remembered, the man who loved them enough to protect them from people they thought they could trust. Ethan cried. Emma got quiet in that way she did when emotions overwhelmed her, and I held them both, these two beautiful humans who'd survived so much. He sounds like he was scared, Ethan said finally. He was terrified, I agreed. He was dying, and he knew he was leaving us alone with people who would hurt us. So he did the only thing he could. He made sure we'd have the weapons to fight back. Did you forgive him for keeping secrets? Emma asked. I thought about that. About the rage I'd felt reading that letter for the first time, the betrayal of not being trusted with the truth, the year of suffering that could have been prevented if she'd shown even an ounce of compassion. And then I thought about everything that came after. The foundation, the families we helped, the strength I'd discovered in myself, the life I'd built from the ashes of David's secrets. I forgive him because I understand now. He wasn't protecting me from the truth. He was protecting me from making the same mistakes he did, from trying to save people who didn't want to be saved, from wasting my compassion on people who would use it against me. That's sad, Emma whispered. It is, but it's also real. Sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who hurt us deepest. And sometimes the greatest gift someone can give us is making sure we're strong enough to survive without them. The twins were quiet for a long moment.
We're going to be okay, right? Ethan asked. Even without Daddy? I looked at my children, at the life we'd built together, at the home filled with love instead of cold opulence, at the foundation that bore their father's name and changed lives every single day, at the future that stretched out before us, bright with possibility. We're more than okay, I said. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. And I meant it. 10 years after David's death, I stood at his grave with the man I'd been seeing for 6 months. James was a teacher, kind and patient, and nothing like David. He knew my whole story, the betrayal, the court battles, the fortune I'd inherited and chose to use for good. And he loved me anyway. Not despite my scars, not because of my money, just because of me. Should I be jealous of a dead man? James asked, only half joking. I looked at the headstone. David Thornfield, beloved husband and father. The dates of his too short life. No, David loved me the only way he knew how, with secrets and protection
and a love so fierce it survived beyond death. But that kind of love is exhausting. It's beautiful, but it's not sustainable. What kind of love is sustainable? I took his hand, the kind that trusts me to fight my own battles, the kind that asks instead of assumes, the kind that sees me as a partner instead of someone who needs protecting. Good answer. James kissed my forehead. Because I have no intention of protecting you. You're terrifying when you're fighting for something. I laughed, surprising myself with the sound. When had laughter become so easy again? Emma and Ethan were waiting in the car. 15 now, on the edge of adulthood. Emma wanted to be a lawyer like Robert. Ethan wanted to run the foundation someday. Both of them understood that wealth was responsibility, not privilege. David would have been so proud. Ready? James asked. I looked one last time at the grave. Thank you, I whispered, for the weapons, for the love, for seeing in me what I couldn't see in myself. The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was David's answer. You're welcome. Now go live. So I did. The foundation gala that year was our biggest yet. 5,000 families helped, 50 support centers, 100 counselors trained in trauma and financial planning, a network of lawyers providing free legal aid to families being manipulated by greedy relatives. We'd taken David's money and his love and his final act of protection, and we'd built something that mattered. As I stood at the podium looking out at the crowd, donors and volunteers and families we'd helped, all gathered to celebrate what we'd accomplished, I felt Emma and Ethan beside me. They'd insisted on speaking too, sharing their father's story from their perspective. When I was 3, my grandmother threw me and my brother into the street. She told my mother we were worthless, that we deserved nothing. The crowd was silent, riveted. She was wrong, Ethan continued, not because we were rich, though we were, not because our father had protected us, though he had, but because every human being has worth. Every child deserves safety. Every family deserves support when they're struggling. Emma took over. The David Thornfield Foundation exists because our father understood that, because our mother proved it, and because we're committed to making sure no family ever has to fight the battles our mother fought alone. The applause was deafening. But what made my heart swell wasn't the recognition or the money or the success. It was watching my children stand tall and confident and compassionate, using their privilege to lift others up instead of pushing them down. Margaret had tried to teach them worth came from blood and money and status. David and I had taught them worth came from character and compassion and courage. Looking at Emma and Ethan now, I knew which lesson had won. After the gala, after the crowds had dispersed and the thank yous had been said, I sat alone in the foundation's main office. Photos covered the walls, families we'd helped, children who had eaten because we'd provided food, single parents who'd found jobs because we'd offered childcare, homes saved from foreclosure, medical bills paid, futures secured.
Each photo represented a life changed, a crisis averted, a family that didn't have to learn the hard lessons I'd learned. My phone buzzed, a text from Vincent. David would be proud. I'm proud. Get some rest, you magnificent human. I smiled. Vincent had become family in the truest sense. Not through blood or marriage, but through choice and loyalty and showing up when it mattered most. Robert texted next. Another successful year. Margaret reached out to my office again. Still want me to ignore her? I thought about it. Margaret was 70 now, alone and stripped of everything she'd valued. Part of me felt pity, but pity wasn't the same as forgiveness, and forgiveness didn't mean letting her back into our lives. Yes, I typed back. Some doors stay closed.
James sent a photo of him and the twins at the ice cream shop, all three of them with ridiculous sundaes. They told you'd skip dinner. I'm bringing you food, no arguments. This, I thought. This is what David wanted for us. Not just survival, not just security, but joy, love, a life filled with people who chose us every single day. 20 minutes later, James walked in with Thai food and a determination to make sure I ate. Emma and Ethan trailed behind, still buzzing with adrenaline from the gala. Mom, did you see how much we raised? Emma was practically vibrating. $7 million. That's enough to help almost 1,000 families. I saw. I pulled her into a hug. You two were amazing up there. We learned from the best, Ethan said, and the simple sincerity of it made my throat tight. We ate dinner in the office, surrounded by the evidence of everything we'd built. And as I watched my children laugh with James, as I felt the warmth of chosen family and hard-won peace, I realized something profound. Margaret had tried to break me by taking everything away. But in losing everything, I discovered what actually mattered. Not the big house or the expensive cars or the status of being a Thornfield. Just this: love, purpose, the strength to fight for what is right. David knew. Somehow, even dying, he'd known that I needed to lose everything before I could find myself. His final gift wasn't the money, though that had been the weapon I needed. His final gift was forcing me to discover that I was enough, that I had always been enough. Just Charlotte, mother, fighter, survivor. Strong enough to stand on my own, brave enough to let others stand with me, and wise enough, finally, to know the difference. What did this story teach you about the power of protecting those you love, even when it requires difficult choices? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.